Margaret Thornton pressed the pistol barrel against her temple. 5 days. 5 days of watching her dreams die on a frozen train platform in Copper Creek, Montana. The man who promised her a home, a future, a family he never existed. Her fingers trembled on the trigger. Then she heard it. Small footsteps crunching through snow. A child's voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't, ma'am. My daddy cries like that too." Sometimes salvation arrives in the smallest boots. I invite you to follow this story to the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The gun was heavier than Margaret expected. She'd taken it from her carpet bag that morning, the pearl-handled revolver her father had given her before he died. "For protection," he'd said. She never thought she'd use it like this. 5 days on this platform. 5 days of watching her reflection fade in the station window. 5 days of becoming the town joke, the mail-order bride whose groom didn't exist. "You still here?" Margaret didn't turn. She knew that voice. Bertha Hollings, the station master's wife, carried judgment like other women carried parasols. "Reckon I am. Thomas Mercer ain't coming, you know. Whole town knows it now. Sheriff says there ain't no mining operation called Mercer Silver. Never was." Margaret's finger brushed the trigger. "I'm aware." "Well." Bertha's skirts rustled as she shifted. "My husband says you can't stay here forever. Station ain't a charity house." "I'll leave today." "Good. We got decent folks coming through. Don't need them seeing—" Bertha paused. "Whatever you are." The door slammed. Margaret finally exhaled. Whatever you are. She'd been a schoolteacher in Boston, a respectable woman, a woman with dreams too big for her circumstances. Now she was whatever you are. A cautionary tale. A fool. The pistol felt warm now, pressed against her palm, almost friendly. She raised it. "Please don't, ma'am." The voice was small, scared, young. Margaret spun around, the gun dropping to her side. A boy stood in the station doorway, 4, maybe 5 years old. He wore boots, 3 sizes too big a coat that had seen better winters, and he was shaking, whether from cold or fear she couldn't tell. "What did you say?" "My daddy cries like that." The boy stepped closer, his 2 big boots scraping the wooden floor. "When he thinks I'm sleeping, he makes that face you're making, like he wants to go away forever." Margaret's throat closed. "Child, where's your father?" "Don't know. I was looking for Biscuit. That's my dog. She ran away in the snow." His lip trembled. "I got lost. Then I saw you through the window, saw the gun. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't see— Are you the bride lady?" He tilted his head. "The one everybody's laughing at." The words cut deeper than Bertha's judgment. Even children knew her shame. "Yes," Margaret whispered. "I'm the bride lady." "Did your husband die too?" "He never existed. He was a lie." The boy processed this with the peculiar gravity of children. "That's worse, I think. At least my mama was real before she went to heaven." Margaret sank onto the bench, the pistol loose in her hand. She should send this child away. Find his father. Return to her plan. But he was already sitting beside her, close enough that she could smell wood smoke on his coat. "I'm Henry," he said, "but everybody calls me Hank." "Margaret." "That's a hard name. Can I call you Maggie?" "That's easier." Despite everything, her lips twitched. "Maggie's fine." "Maggie." He tested it. "My mama was Hannah. That's almost the same letters." "Is it Hannah, Maggie?" He counted on his fingers. "Both got 2 of the same letters in the middle." "You know your letters?" "Some. Daddy tries to teach me, but he gets the words mixed up. He pretends he doesn't, but I know." Margaret studied this small, serious child. His eyes were gray like storm clouds over the harbor she'd left behind. His hair needed cutting. His fingernails were dirty. But his gaze was clear and steady, too steady for a boy his age. "Hank, how long have you been walking?" "Dunno. Long time. My feet hurt." She looked at his boots. The leather was cracked, letting snow seep through. His toes must be frozen. "Take those off." "What?" "Your boots. Now." He obeyed, and Margaret's heart clenched. His socks were soaked, his feet red and raw. Frostbite was setting in. Without thinking, she pulled off her own shawl, the good wool one, the only warm thing she had left, and wrapped his feet, rubbing circulation back into the small, cold toes. "That tickles." "Good. That means you can still feel them." "Daddy does this sometimes, when I've been out too long." Hank watched her work. "You're good at it. I had younger brothers, a long time ago." "Where are they now?" "Gone. Fever took them when I was 12. "Oh." He was quiet for a moment. "Mama was fever too. Daddy says heaven needed her more than we did, but I don't think that's true. I needed her a lot." Margaret's hands stilled on his feet. "I'm sure you did." "Daddy needed her more, though. He forgot how to smile when she left." Hank looked up at her. "You forgot how to smile too, didn't you?" "Yes, I suppose I did." "Maybe you could come teach me letters. Then you'd have something to smile about. Daddy pays in eggs and milk mostly, but we got a chicken that lays real good." "Hank, I can't just—" "Please." His small hand found hers. "Daddy needs help. He won't say so, because he's stubborn like a mule. That's what Mrs. Rivers says, but he needs help. And you need a place to go. You do, don't you?" Margaret looked at the gun still in her other hand, then at this child with his two big boots and his mother's ghost in his eyes. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I need a place to go." "Then come home with me. I'll tell Daddy you saved me from the snow. He won't turn you away if you saved me." It's not lying." Hank stood wobbling on his shawl-wrapped feet. "You did save me, and maybe I saved you too. That's what Reverend Brennan calls a fair trade." The walk to the McAllister ranch took 2 hours. Margaret carried Hank most of the way, his arms wrapped around her neck, her carpet bag abandoned somewhere in the snowdrifts. She'd go back for it. Maybe. If there was anything worth going back for. The boy talked the entire time. About Biscuit the runaway dog. About the horses his daddy raised. About his mother's grave under the big pine tree, and how his daddy still left wildflowers there, even in winter, when he had to dig through snow to find the frozen ground. "He thinks I don't see," Hank said, his breath warm against Margaret's neck. "But I see everything. That's my secret power. I see things people try to hide." "What do you see in me?" "Sad. Real sad. But not mean sad like Mrs. Hollings. Your sad is tired. Like you've been carrying something heavy for a long time and your arms hurt." Margaret stopped walking. The snow was falling harder now, and she could barely see 10 feet ahead. But Hank's words had hit something she'd kept buried for years. "You're a strange child, Hank McAllister." "Daddy says that too, but he says it nice, like it's a good thing." He pointed over her shoulder. "There, that's home." Through the white curtain of snow, Margaret made out a shape. A cabin, small but solid-looking, with smoke curling from the chimney. A barn beside it, larger than the house. Fences that needed mending. A gate hanging crooked on its hinges. "Hank!" The roar came from nowhere, from everywhere. A man burst from the cabin door, running toward them through knee-deep snow. He was tall, broad-shouldered, bearded, wild-eyed with panic. "Hank!" "Daddy?" The boy squirmed in Margaret's arms. "Daddy, I found her." The man reached them in seconds, snatching Hank from Margaret, with hands that trembled visibly. He crushed the boy against his chest, his face buried in Hank's hair, his shoulders shaking. 3 hours. His voice was ragged. 3 hours you've been gone. I thought, I'm sorry, Daddy. I was looking for Biscuit, and I got lost, and then I found Maggie, and... Who? The man looked up, his eyes gray like his sons found Margaret for the first time. They went from desperate to suspicious in a heartbeat. Who are you? Margaret Thornton. She stood her ground, though everything in her wanted to run. I found your son at the train station. He was half frozen. The train station's 4 miles from here. Yes. You carried him. 4 miles, through a blizzard. He couldn't walk. His feet... I saw. The man's jaw tightened. Your shawl's around them. It was the only... Daddy! Hank tugged his father's beard. She was going to hurt herself, with a gun. I stopped her. The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. Hank... She put it away when she saw me. She chose me instead of the gun. Hank's voice was matter-of-fact. That means something, doesn't it, Daddy? You always say choosing is what matters. The man stared at Margaret. She watched his expression shift suspicion to surprise, to something that might have been recognition. You're her, he said finally. The bride from the station. Does everyone know? This is Copper Creek. Everyone knows everything. He shifted Hank to one hip. I'm Jacob McAllister. People call me Jake. Hank already told me. He tells everybody everything. Gets it from his mother. A shadow passed over his face. Come inside. You'll freeze standing there. I don't want to impose. Lady, you carried my boy 4 miles through a blizzard. You're not imposing. You're being stupid if you stay out here arguing about it. He turned and walked toward the cabin, not waiting to see if she followed. Margaret hesitated. The smart thing would be to go back to town. Find somewhere, anywhere else. This man didn't want her here. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way he hadn't looked back. Maggie, Hank called from his father's arms. Come on. I want to show you where Mama's flowers grow. She followed. The cabin was warm. That was the first thing Margaret noticed. Warm and clean and sparse with nothing unnecessary. A kitchen and living area combined, a wood stove crackling in the corner, a table with 2 chairs. Only 2. Sit. Jake nodded toward the stove. I'll make coffee. You don't have to. I'm making coffee. It wasn't a request. Hank was already pulling at his father's coat. Daddy, Maggie knows letters real good. She was a teacher. She could teach me proper, not like you do with the sounds all wrong. Jake's hands stilled on the coffee pot. Hank? What? It's true. You say cat when it says bat, and that's enough. The sharpness in his voice made Hank shrink back. Margaret saw it happen, the spark dying in the boy's eyes replaced by something careful and guarded. Sorry, Daddy. Jake's shoulders dropped. He knelt, bringing himself to Hank's level. No, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to snap. I was scared, that's all. Scared I'd lost you like I lost... He stopped, swallowed, stood. Coffee's almost ready, he said, and his voice was normal again. Too normal. Controlled. Margaret understood that control. She'd worn it herself for 5 days on a train platform, holding everything together, while inside she was shattering. Mr. McAllister. Jake. Jake. I won't stay long, just until the blizzard passes. Then I'll find somewhere. Where? I don't know yet. You got money? No. Family? No. Plan? She didn't answer. They both knew what her plan had been. Jake poured coffee into a tin cup, set it on the table. Drink that, then we'll talk. About what? About what happens next. He sat across from her, Hank climbing into his lap. My boy says you saved him. Way I see it, that earns you a roof until you figure things out. Not charity. Call it payment. I don't want... Didn't ask what you want, asking what you need. His gray eyes were steady. Nobody comes to Montana for no reason, Miss Thornton. I don't need to know yours, but I know what it looks like when someone's out of road. Seen it in the mirror enough times. Margaret wrapped her hands around the warm cup. The coffee was strong, bitter, nothing like the tea she'd grown up drinking in Boston parlors. The man I came here to marry doesn't exist, she said. Thomas Mercer. He wrote me letters for 6 months. Beautiful letters. Promised me a silver mine, a house, a future. I spent everything I had on a train ticket. And found nothing. Found out I'm a fool. That's something. Finding out you trusted wrong don't make you a fool. Makes you human. Jake's voice was rough but not unkind. Being human ain't a character flaw despite what some folks think. Hank had fallen asleep against his father's chest, exhausted from his adventure. Jake held him with the ease of long practice, one hand supporting the boy's back. What happened to his mother? Margaret asked, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry. That's not my... She died birthing him. Jake's jaw worked. Doc said her heart wasn't strong enough. She held him for 10 minutes before she went. Named him Henry after her father. Then she was gone. I'm sorry. Everybody's sorry. Sorry, don't bring her back. He stood cradling Hank. I'm gonna put him to bed. There's a room through that door used to be Hannah's sewing room. Got a cot. You can use it tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Jake. Just tonight, Miss Thornton. Then you can decide to stay or go. Nobody's trapping you here. He paused at the doorway. But for what it's worth, Hank ain't talked this much since Hannah died. Whatever you did at that station, you woke something up in him. He disappeared through the doorway, leaving Margaret alone with the fire and her cold coffee. She looked around the sparse cabin. At the single photograph on the mantel, a young woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. At the child's drawings tacked to the wall. At the basket of mending that looked untouched for months. This wasn't her life. These weren't her people. But for the first time in 5 days, she wasn't thinking about the gun in her carpet bag. She was thinking about a boy who saw things people tried to hide. About a man who'd lost everything and kept going anyway. About letters written by a liar and a train station bench worn smooth by other people's journeys. The door creaked. Jake returned without Hank looking uncomfortable in his own home. I should tell you something, he said. So there's no misunderstanding. All right. I don't want a wife. Not looking for one. Not trying to replace what I had. His words were careful, practiced like he'd said them before. If you stay, it's his help. Nothing more. Hank needs things I can't give him, learning woman's touch, someone who ain't half broken. But that don't mean... I understand. Do you? You're offering me a job, not a marriage. That's more than anyone else in this town has offered. Margaret met his eyes. And for what it's worth, I wasn't looking to get married again anyway. The first attempt cured me of that particular dream. Something flickered in Jake's expression. Relief, maybe, or surprise. Fair enough, then. One condition. His eyebrows rose. You're making conditions now. One, non-negotiable. Margaret stood, finding strength she didn't know she had left. I'm not charity. Whatever I do here, I earn my keep. Room and board in exchange for teaching Hank and helping with the house. Fair trade. If that changes, if I become a burden, you tell me. And I leave. No arguments. Jake studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Fair trade. He extended his hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of work. Margaret shook it. Trial period, he added. 1 month. If it ain't working for any of us, you go. I'll give you enough money to get somewhere warmer. No hard feelings. And if it is working, then we talk about month 2. Almost, he smiled. I don't plan far ahead anymore, Miss Thornton. Learned the hard way that plans don't mean much. Maggie. What? Your son calls me Maggie. You might as well, too. He processed this. Maggie, then. I'm still Jake. I know. They stood there awkwardly, two broken people in a cabin that smelled like wood smoke and coffee, bound by nothing but a child's desperate hope and a blizzard that wouldn't stop. "I should sleep," Margaret said finally. "It's been a long 5 days." "I imagine it has." She moved toward the sewing room door, then stopped. "Jake." "Yeah. Thank you. For not asking why I had that gun." His expression didn't change. "Didn't need to ask. I knew." "How?" "Because I've got one too. And I know what it's for." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with shared understanding. "Good night, Maggie." "Good night, Jake." She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, breathing hard. The room was small, cold, with a narrow cot and a trunk she didn't dare open. But it was shelter. It was warmth. It was one more day she hadn't expected to see. Through the door, she heard Jake banking the fire, heard his heavy footsteps, heard the front door open and close going to the barn, probably where Hank said he slept most nights, because the house felt too full of empty. Margaret lay down on the cot, still in her traveling dress, and stared at the ceiling. She'd come to Montana to be Thomas Mercer's wife. That dream was dead. But maybe something else was beginning. Something she hadn't planned. Something that smelled like strong coffee and sounded like a child saying Maggie, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Outside, the blizzard raged on. But inside, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Margaret Thornton felt something she'd forgotten existed. Hope. Not much. Not. Just a splinter. Just enough to get through the night without reaching for her carpet bag. Just enough to wait for morning. Morning came with the smell of burning. Maggie jolted awake, disoriented, her heart pounding. The sewing room was freezing, her breath visible in the gray dawn light. For a moment she didn't know where she was, then everything crashed back. The station, the gun, the boy. She scrambled off the cot and pushed through the door. Jake stood at the stove, cursing under his breath. Smoke billowed from a pan. Something black and unrecognizable sizzled in its center. Damn it all to... Let me!" He spun around, startled. Maggie was already moving, grabbing a cloth, pulling the pan off the heat. She scraped the ruined contents into the fire and pumped water into the pan steam, hissing as metal met liquid. "You don't have to." "Eggs." "What?" "Do you have eggs and flour, lard?" Jake stared at her like she was speaking Chinese. "Pantry. Back shelf. Mine." Maggie found what she needed. Her hands moved from memory, cracking eggs, mixing batter, heating the cleaned pan with practiced efficiency. In Boston, she'd cooked for her father and brothers before the fever took them. In the boarding house, after she'd helped in the kitchen to reduce her rent. Cooking was survival. She knew survival. "You didn't have to do that." Jake hadn't moved from where he stood. "You were burning the house down." "I was making breakfast." "Same thing, apparently." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Nobody had talked back to him in a while, she guessed. "Daddy burned the eggs again." Hank appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw Maggie, his whole face transformed. "You stayed, Daddy? She stayed?" "I see that." "I told you she would. I told you." Hank ran to Maggie, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Are you making pancakes? Mama used to make pancakes." "Daddy tries, but they come out like shoe leather." "That's enough, Hank." "It's true, though. You said we should always tell the truth." Maggie bit back a smile. "They're almost ready. Go wash your hands." "Yes, ma'am." He scampered off, his two big boots clomping against the wooden floor. The kitchen fell silent except for the sizzle of batter. "He likes you," Jake said finally. "He doesn't know me." "Hank knows people. Always has. His mama said he was born with old eyes." Jake moved to the table, sat heavily in one of the two chairs. "He don't take to strangers. Took him 6 months to stop hiding when the Reverend came by. Maybe he just needed someone who'd listen. Maybe." Maggie flipped the pancakes. Golden brown. Perfect. "Where do you keep the plates?" "Cabinet above the basin." She found them 3 plates she noticed, though only 2 chairs at the table. The 3rd plate was dusty, pushed to the back like something too painful to throw away, but too heavy to use. She pulled down 2 plates, hesitated, then reached for the 3rd. "Don't." Jake's voice was sharp. Maggie turned. "That was Hannah's." "I know." She held his gaze. "Hank told me. But you've got 3 people eating breakfast now. Seems a waste to let a good plate collect dust." The silence stretched. Maggie weighted the plate in her hands. "Fine." Jake looked away. "Do what you want." She set the table. 3 plates, 3 forks, 3 cups for coffee. When Hank returned, hands still dripping wet, he stopped dead. "That's Mama's plate." "Is that all right?" Hank looked at his father. Something passed between them, a conversation without words, the kind only family could have. "Yeah." Hank's voice was small but steady. "Yeah, it's all right. Mama would want it used. She hated waste." They ate in silence at first. Hank devoured his pancakes like he'd never tasted food. Jake ate slowly, methodically, not looking up. Maggie picked at her own plate, too aware of being watched, of being evaluated. "These are good." Hank spoke with his mouth full. "Better than Daddy's." "Everything's better than mine." Jake's voice was dry. "Dog food's better than mine." "That's true. Biscuit won't even eat your cooking." "Biscuit eats horse manure. Her opinion don't count." Maggie choked on her coffee. Both McAllisters looked at her. "Sorry." She wiped her mouth. I didn't expect." "What? Humor. You don't seem the type." Jake's eyebrow rose. "What type do I seem?" "Grim. Serious. The kind of man who'd count smiling as a character weakness." Hank giggled. Jake's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Hannah used to say the same thing. Said I had a face like a funeral and a heart like a hidden garden." He stood abruptly, taking his plate to the basin. "I'll be in the barn. Horses need feeding. Hank show Maggie where everything is. She'll need to know if she's staying the month." "Yes, Daddy." Jake grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. Paused. "Thank you," he said without turning around. "For breakfast." Then he was gone, cold air rushing in before the door slammed shut. Hank was already tugging at Maggie's sleeve. "Come on, I'll show you Mama's garden. It's dead now, cause of winter, but in spring it's real pretty. And I'll show you where the chickens used to be before the fox got them, and the root cellar where Daddy hides when he wants to be alone but doesn't want me to know he's crying." "Hank, maybe your father's private moments should stay private." "Why, crying ain't bad. Mama said tears are just feelings that got too big to stay inside." He pulled her toward the door. "Come on, I'll show you everything. Then you'll know the ranch as good as me, and you won't want to leave." Maggie let herself be led. The ranch was smaller than she'd expected. A cabin, a barn, a paddock with 3 horses huddled against the cold. Fences that sagged. A well that needed its rope replaced. Everything showing the wear of being maintained by one man who was barely maintaining himself. "That's Mama's grave." Hank pointed to a pine tree on a small rise. "Daddy goes there every morning, even when it's snowing, even when his hands get so cold they turn blue." "Does he talk to her?" "Sometimes. Sometimes he just stands there." I asked him once what he was doing, and he said he was remembering. Said remembering was the only way to keep someone alive after they're gone. Maggie thought about her own dead, her mother, her father, her brothers. She hadn't visited their graves in years. Hadn't had the money or the time or the heart. "Your father loves her very much." "Loved. That's what you say about dead people." Hank's voice was matter of fact. "Mrs. Rivers told me that. She said we have to use past tense now because Mama's in the past." Mrs. Rivers sounds like a piece of work. "She's nice, though. She gave me candy at Christmas. And she tells Daddy he needs to stop moping, but she says it gentle, not mean." Hank squinted up at her. "Are you going to make Daddy stop moping?" "That's not really my job, Hank. But you could try. You made him almost smile at breakfast. Nobody makes Daddy almost smile." Before Maggie could answer, A bark echoed across the snow. "Biscuit!" A dog came bounding toward them, a scrappy thing, brown and white with one ear that flopped and one that stood straight. She launched herself at Hank, knocking him into a snowdrift, licking his face while he shrieked with laughter. "She came back, Maggie! She came back! I knew she would!" The barn door opened. Jake emerged, saw the dog, and his shoulders dropped with relief. "Fool animal," he called out. "Running off in a blizzard." "She's not a fool, Daddy. She's an adventurer. She's a menace." But Jake was almost smiling again as he watched his son roll in the snow with the dog. "Found her hiding in the back of the barn this morning. Must have snuck in through the broken board I keep meaning to fix. She was home the whole time. Apparently, while my son was wandering 4 miles through a blizzard looking for her." Jake's eyes met Maggie's. "Guess it worked out." "Guess it did." They stood there watching Hank play. The morning sun was breaking through the clouds, making the snow glitter like scattered diamonds. For a moment, everything felt almost peaceful. "I need to go to town today," Jake said. "Supplies. Usually leave Hank with Ellie Rivers, she runs the boarding house. But if you're here, I can watch him. You sure he's a handful?" "I was a teacher, Mr. McAllister. I've handled worse than one 5-year-old. "Jake." "What?" "You called me Jake yesterday. Don't go backward." Maggie felt heat rise to her cheeks, which was ridiculous. "Fine. Jake, I can watch Hank." "Good." He turned toward the barn. "I'll be back by nightfall. There's stew in the cellar, just needs heating. Don't let him eat too many preserves, he'll make himself sick. And if he tells you he's allowed to stay up till midnight, he's lying." "Noted." Jake paused at the barn door. "Maggie." "Yes, that carpet bag of yours, the one you left at the station." Her blood went cold. "What about it?" "I sent word with Ellie yesterday. She's holding it for you at the boarding house. I'll bring it back today." His voice was carefully neutral. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." He knew. Of course he knew. Hank had told him about the gun. "Bring it," she said quietly. "But you can keep the pistol. Sell it if you want. I don't need it anymore." Jake nodded once. Then he disappeared into the barn. Maggie watched him go, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. He'd sent for her bag. Before he knew if she'd stay. Before he knew anything about her, except that she'd saved his son and almost ended her own life. It wasn't kindness. It was something more complicated. Recognition, maybe. One drowning person spotting another. "Maggie!" Hank's voice pulled her back. "Come play with us. Biscuit wants to meet you proper." She went. The day passed faster than Maggie expected. Hank was as promised a handful. He had questions about everything: why the sky was blue, why snow was cold, why words were spelled different than they sounded. His mind jumped from topic to topic like a frog on hot stones. But underneath the chaos, Maggie saw something else. A child desperately hungry for attention, for learning, for someone to take his questions seriously instead of shushing him. "Daddy says I ask too much," Hank admitted while they sat by the fire practicing letters. "He says questions are like water too many and you drown." "Your daddy's wrong about that." "He's wrong about a lot of things. Don't tell him I said so. Our secret." By afternoon, Hank could write his full name without help. His letters were wobbly, uncertain, but they were his. He stared at the paper like he'd created gold. "That's me," he whispered. "Henry James McAllister. That's really me." "That's really you. Wait till Daddy sees—" Then his face fell. He won't be able to read it. "Why not?" Hank chewed his lip. "Daddy can't read, not really. Mama used to do all the reading and writing. After she died, letters just pile up. Daddy pretends he reads them, but I see him. He just stares at the words like they're a foreign language." Maggie filed this information away. "Have you tried teaching him?" He won't let me. Gets embarrassed. Says a man shouldn't need his son to teach him nothing. Anything. What? Shouldn't need his son to teach him anything. Double negatives. Hank grinned. See, you're a real teacher. The front door opened just as the sun was setting. Jake stomped in, covered in snow, carrying Maggie's carpet bag and a crate of supplies. Storm's coming, he announced. Bad one. Got back just in time. Daddy, look. Hank thrust his paper forward. Maggie taught me to write my name. Jake set down the crate, took the paper, stared at it. Maggie watched his face, watched the struggle there, pride in his son warring with shame at his own limitations. He traced the letters with one calloused finger. That's real good, son. Can you read it? The question was innocent. The silence that followed was not. Course I can. Jake's voice was gruff. Henry James McAllister. My boy. But his eyes had been moving wrong, Maggie noticed, not tracking the letters. He'd recognized his son's name from shape and context, not from reading. I'm going to be a scholar, Hank announced. Maggie says I'm smart enough. Did she now? She said I have a keen mind. That means sharp like a knife. Jake finally looked at Maggie. Something in his expression had shifted, gratitude mixed with wariness. Thank you for teaching him. That's what I'm here for. No. Jake set the paper on the mantel, careful as a holy relic. That's more than room and board. That's... He stopped, started again. Hank ain't had a real lesson since Hannah passed. The schoolhouse closed when the mine started failing. Ain't enough children left in Copper Creek to justify a teacher. How many children are there? 6, maybe 7, scattered across the ranches. That's enough for a school. Jake laughed harsh, disbelieving. With what building? What supplies? What money? With determination. Maggie met his eyes. I didn't become a teacher because it was easy. I became one because children deserve to learn, regardless of what their parents can afford. This ain't Boston. No, it's better. In Boston there were rules about who could teach and what could be taught. Here, she gestured at the cabin, the snow, the vast emptiness beyond. Here you make your own rules. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into the carpet bag, pulled out her pistol, and set it on the table between them. Ellie cleaned it for you. Said it was too nice a piece to let rust. Maggie stared at the gun. The pearl handle gleamed in the firelight. I told you to keep it. I know what you told me. I also know that running from something don't make it disappear. Jake pushed the gun toward her. It's yours. Do what you want with it. But keeping it means owning it. What it is, what you almost did with it. You don't get to pretend that day at the station didn't happen. I don't want to remember it. Too bad. Remembering's how we keep from making the same mistakes. His voice softened. I remember Hannah every day, every minute, hurts like hell. But forgetting would hurt worse. Maggie picked up the pistol. It was heavier than she remembered. Or maybe she was just weaker. I was going to do it, she said quietly. Right there on the platform. I'd decided. Then Hank appeared and you chose different. I chose him. Good. Jake stood, moving toward the fire. That's good. Choosing life even when life don't seem worth choosing, that's what it means to survive out here. You keep choosing day after day until choosing ain't hard anymore. Does it get easier? Easier, no. He stared into the flames. But it gets different. The pain don't go away, but you grow around it. Like a tree grows around a nail someone hammered into it years ago. The nail's still there, but the tree keeps growing anyway. Hank had fallen asleep on the rug, biscuit curled against his chest. The fire crackled. Outside wind began to howl, the promised storm arriving right on schedule. I should make dinner, Maggie said. I'll help. You'll burn something. Then I'll help by staying out of your way. They worked in silence, moving around each other in the small kitchen. Maggie heated the stew while Jake set the table 3 places now without being asked. She noticed. She didn't mention it. Dinner was quiet. Hank woke long enough to eat, then stumbled to bed without protest. Even Biscuit seemed subdued, settling near the fire with a groan. "Storm's getting worse," Jake said. "I should check the horses." "You'll freeze." "Done it 100 times." "Then do it 101, but take this." Maggie handed him a cup of coffee heavily laced with the whiskey she'd found in the pantry. Warmth from the inside. Jake took the cup. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. "Why are you being kind to me?" he asked abruptly. "What?" "I've given you nothing but cold shoulders and burnt breakfasts. Why are you still here?" Maggie considered the question. "Because your son asked me to stay. Because you didn't turn me away when you could have. Because—" She stopped. "Because what?" "Because you look at me like I'm a person. Not a fool. Not the bride who got swindled. Just a person who's having a hard time." Jake set down the cup. "That's what you are. Not to the rest of this town. The rest of this town can go to hell." The vehemence surprised her. "They've been waiting for me to fail since Hannah died. Whispering about how a man can't raise a boy alone, how I should remarry or send Hank to relatives back east, like he's a problem to be solved, not a child who lost his mother. Is that why you don't hire help?" "I don't hire help because every woman in a 50-mile radius sees me as a meal ticket. Widower, with land, desperate for a wife, that's what they see. Not a man, a opportunity." His jaw tightened. "You're the first person in 4 years who looked at me without calculating what I'm worth. Maybe because I'm not worth anything myself." "That ain't true." "Isn't it? I'm a woman with no money, no family, no prospects. I came here to marry a man who doesn't exist. That makes me either a fool or a fraud." "Makes you trusting." Jake's voice was gruff. "Trusting ain't a crime. The crime's on whoever broke that trust." The wind screamed outside. The fire popped. Maggie felt something shifting between them. Not romance, not quite, but something. An understanding. A recognition. "I'm going to check the horses," Jake said finally. "Don't wait up." He was gone before she could respond. Maggie sat by the fire, the pistol still in her hand. She turned it over, watching the light play on the pearl handle. Her father had given her this gun for protection. She'd almost used it to destroy herself. Now it sat in her palm, waiting for her to decide what it meant. Slowly, deliberately, she stood, walked to the window, looked out at the howling white nothing. Then she opened the glass and threw the gun into the storm. It disappeared instantly, swallowed by snow and darkness. Her hand was empty. She was shaking. But she was still standing. She was still here. And tomorrow she would still choose to stay. 3 weeks passed, like water finding its level. Maggie fell into the rhythm of the McAllister ranch without realizing it was happening. Mornings began with breakfast. She cooked. Jake ate without complaint. Hank chattered enough for all 3 of them. Days filled with teaching mending, cleaning, the endless small tasks that kept a household alive. Evenings brought quiet, Hank practicing his letters, Jake working leather by the fire, Maggie darning socks that seemed to sprout holes faster than she could fix them. It wasn't the life she'd imagined. It was better. Harder, but better. "You're getting flour on your nose." Maggie looked up from the bread dough. Jake stood in the doorway, snow melting off his coat, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Occupational hazard. Looks good on you." She blinked. Was that a compliment? From Jake McAllister. Before she could respond, Hank came barreling through the door. Biscuit at his heels. "Daddy, there's a man coming on a fancy horse." Jake's whole body changed, relaxed to rigid in a heartbeat. "What kind of man?" "City kind. Got a coat with shiny buttons." Jake moved to the window. Maggie saw his jaw tighten. "Stay inside," he told Hank. "Both of you." "Jake, what?" "Inside." He grabbed his rifle from above the door and stepped onto the porch. Maggie pulled Hank close, positioning them where they could see through the window but stay hidden. A rider was approaching a man on a chestnut mare wearing clothes too fine for Montana territory. Even from a distance, something about him made her skin crawl. "Mr. McAllister," the man's voice carried across the snow. "I'm here on business. No need for weapons." "State your business from there." "I'm Calvin Whitmore, from the bank in Helena." The man smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "I believe we have matters to discuss regarding your property." Jake didn't lower the rifle. "I don't owe the bank nothing." "Anything." The correction was automatic condescending. "And I'm afraid that's not quite accurate. May I approach? These matters are better discussed face to face." A long pause. Then Jake stepped aside, gesturing with the rifle barrel. "Porch only. You don't come inside." Whitmore dismounted with the ease of a man used to being obeyed. He was older than Maggie had first thought, 50 maybe, with silver at his temples and the soft hands of someone who'd never done physical labor. "Charming place," Whitmore said, climbing the porch steps. "Rustic. What do you want?" "Direct. I appreciate that." Whitmore pulled papers from his coat. "Your property taxes, Mr. McAllister. 3 years unpaid. The total with interest and penalties comes to $212. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. "That's impossible." Jake's voice was flat. "Hannah paid the taxes every year." "Your wife, yes. Lovely woman, I met her once in town. But it seems she fell behind in her final year. Understandable given her condition. And since her passing—" Whitmore shrugged. "Well, things slip through the cracks. I never got any notices." "They were sent. Perhaps they were lost. Perhaps they were ignored. The result is the same." Whitmore held out the papers. "You have 60 days to pay in full. After that, the property reverts to the territory, and I'm authorized to auction it to recover the debt." Jake took the papers. His hands were steady, but Maggie could see the tension in his shoulders the way his grip on the rifle had whitened his knuckles. $200. In 60 days. I'm sure a resourceful man like yourself can find a way." Whitmore's smile widened. "Of course, if the burden is too great, I might be persuaded to make an offer on the property myself. Fair market value, naturally. You'd walk away with enough to start fresh somewhere else." "This land has been in my family for 20 years. Sentiment is a luxury, Mr. McAllister. One you may no longer be able to afford." Whitmore tipped his hat. 60 days. I'll be in touch." He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. Jake stood frozen on the porch, staring at the papers in his hand. Maggie opened the door. "Jake." "Not now." "Let me see the papers. Maybe there's a mistake." "I said not now." He pushed past her into the house, threw the papers on the table, and kept walking straight through to the back door out into the snow toward the barn. Hank tugged at Maggie's skirt. "Is Daddy okay?" "He will be." She hoped it wasn't a lie. "Go practice your letters. I need to read something." The papers confirmed everything Whitmore had said. 3 years of unpaid taxes, plus interest, plus penalties, that seemed designed to make the debt impossible to clear. The final number 212/47 might as well have been $1 million. Maggie knew Jake's finances. She'd seen the ledgers, the careful notations in Hannah's handwriting that stopped abruptly 4 years ago. After that chaos, bills stuffed in drawers, payments missed, a man drowning in grief barely keeping his head above water. He had maybe $50 in savings. The horses were worth something, but selling them meant selling his livelihood. There was nothing else. Unless, she thought about her own situation. The inheritance from her aunt that Thomas Mercer had promised would be waiting for her in Montana. A lie, of course. But the inheritance itself was real $300 held in a Boston bank, inaccessible without her physical presence to claim it. $300, more than enough to save the ranch. 3,000 miles away. Might as well be on the moon. Jake didn't come back until after dark. Maggie had fed Hank, put him to bed, and was sitting by the fire when the door finally opened. Jake entered like a ghost, snow-covered and hollow-eyed. "Coffee's on the stove," she said. He poured himself a cup, sat heavily at the table, said nothing. "I read the papers." "Figured you would. There has to be a way. We could sell some of the horses. 3 horses ain't worth $200, not in winter, not in a dying town. Then we find another way. Talk to the other ranchers, pool resources. They're all in the same boat. Whitmore's been buying up land all over the territory, squeezing out anyone he can." Jake's laugh was bitter. "This ain't about taxes, it's about the railroad." "The railroad? New line coming through next year, cuts right across this valley. Land that's worthless now will be worth a fortune once the tracks go in." He drained his coffee like it was whiskey. "Whitmore knows. He's been collecting properties for months, waiting for us to fail so he can scoop up the pieces." That's monstrous. That's business. That's how the world works for people like us." Jake stood moving to the fire. 20 years my family worked this land. My father built this cabin with his own hands. My mother's buried here. Hannah's buried here. And in 60 days, none of it will matter." "Jake, you can't give up." "I ain't giving up. I'm being realistic." He turned to face her. "You should leave. Go back east. Find a real teaching position somewhere. You don't need to be here when this falls apart." "I'm not leaving." "Maggie, I said I'm not leaving." She stood, meeting his eyes. "I came here with nothing. You gave me a place to stay, a purpose, a reason to keep breathing. You think I'm going to run the moment things get hard? This ain't your fight. It is now. Why? Why do you care what happens to this ranch, to us?" The question hung between them. Maggie felt the answer pressing against her chest, terrifying in its simplicity. "Because this is the first place I've felt like I belong since my family died. Because Hank looks at me like I matter. Because you—" She stopped. "Because I what?" "Because you're a good man, Jake McAllister. Stubborn and wounded and terrible at asking for help, but good. And good men shouldn't lose everything just because the world isn't fair." Jake stared at her. The fire crackled. Outside, an owl called into the darkness. "You don't know me," he said finally. "You've been here 3 weeks. That ain't enough time to know anyone. I know you get up every morning and choose to keep going even when it hurts. I know you love your son so much it scares you. I know you still leave flowers on Hannah's grave even when the ground is frozen solid." Maggie stepped closer. "I know you haven't asked me a single question about that day at the station, because you understand, some wounds don't need poking. I know you're gentler than you pretend to be, and stronger than you believe you are. Maggie, I know you're afraid of losing this place because it's the last piece of her you have left. And I know that fear is eating you alive." Jake's hand came up not to push her away, but to cup her face. His palm was rough, calloused, trembling slightly. "You can't save me," he whispered. "Nobody can. I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to stand beside you." She covered his hand with her own. "There's a difference." For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. The air between them was thick with possibility, with 4 years of loneliness meeting 5 days of despair, with 2 broken people finding something unexpected in the wreckage. Then, Hank's voice cut through the darkness. "Daddy, I had a bad dream." Jake pulled back like he'd been burned. His hand dropped from her face. "Coming, son." He disappeared into Hank's room, leaving Maggie alone with her racing heart and the echo of what had almost happened. She sat down heavily by the fire. What was she doing? She'd been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks of playing house, pretending she belonged, ignoring the inevitable moment when it all fell apart. And now she was developing feelings for a man who was still in love with his dead wife. A man who might lose everything in 60 days. A man who'd made it clear he wasn't looking for a replacement. Smart Maggie. Very smart. But she couldn't make herself regret it. Couldn't make herself wish she'd stayed on that platform with her father's pistol. Whatever this was, whatever they were becoming, it was better than the alternative. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Ellie Rivers arrived first, her wagon loaded with supplies and gossip in equal measure. Heard about Whitmore's visit, she announced, climbing down with the spryness of a woman half her age. Whole town's talking. Whole town's always talking, Jake muttered. True enough, but this time they're talking about helping. Ellie pulled a jar from her basket. Preserves from my pantry. Mrs. Henderson sent flour. The Reverend's organizing a collection. I don't need charity. It ain't charity, you stubborn mule. It's community. There's a difference. Ellie pushed past him into the cabin. Now where's that boy of yours? I brought him peppermint sticks. Over the next few hours, more neighbors arrived. The Hendersons with their 3 daughters, old Tom Buckley from the neighboring ranch, even Reverend Brennan carrying a Bible and a determined expression. We've been talking, the Reverend said, settling into a chair by the fire. About Whitmore. About what he's doing. Ain't nothing to do about it. Jake's voice was tired. Man's got the law on his side. The law maybe, but not decency. Reverend Brennan leaned forward. 6 families in this valley, Jake. 6 families Whitmore's trying to squeeze out. Separate, we don't stand a chance. But together we're still poor. Together, we're stubborn. Old Tom grinned, showing gaps where teeth should be. And stubbornness counts for something in Montana. Maggie watched from the kitchen, where she was helping Ellie organize the donated supplies. The scene reminded her of something church gatherings in Boston, neighbors coming together after a fire or flood. Community. She'd forgotten what it looked like. That Jake McAllister's a fool if he can't see what's right in front of him, Ellie said quietly. I'm sorry. You girl. He looks at you like you hung the moon, but he's too scared to admit it. Ellie clucked her tongue. Men. They'll charge into a burning barn to save a horse, but ask them to admit they got feelings, might as well ask them to fly. I don't think Jake... I've known Jake McAllister since he was a boy younger than Hank. Watched him grow up, watched him marry Hannah, watched him break when she died. Ellie's voice softened. I ain't seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even Hannah, God rest her. That can't be true. Honey, Hannah was comfort, familiar. They grew up together, married young, never knew anything else. You're different. You're a choice. Ellie patted her hand. Give him time. He'll figure it out. The meeting went on for hours. Plans were made. Loose, desperate plans, but plans nonetheless. Each family would contribute what they could. They'd approach the bank and Helena appeal over Whitmore's head. They'd write to the territorial governor. They'd make noise. It wasn't much. But it was something. By the time everyone left, the sun was setting and Jake looked more exhausted than Maggie had ever seen him. That was unexpected, she said. That was a waste of time. He rubbed his face. Whitmore ain't gonna back down because a bunch of ranchers wrote letters. Maybe not. But at least you're not fighting alone. Jake looked at her. Something in his expression shifted. I'm sorry, he said. About last night. I shouldn't have... Don't apologize for being human. I'm not apologizing for that. I'm apologizing for pulling away. He moved closer, and Maggie's breath caught. You were right. Everything you said about me. I'm scared. Terrified. Not just of losing the ranch, but of... Of what? Of this. Of you. Of wanting something I shouldn't want. Maggie's heart pounded. Why shouldn't you want it? Because Hannah's dead, Jake. The words were gentle but firm. She's been dead for 4 years. And I don't think she'd want you to spend the rest of your life alone. You don't know what she'd want. I know what any woman who loved you would want. For you to be happy, for Hank to have a family, for this house to be full of life again instead of just memories. Jake's hand found hers. His grip was desperate, almost painful. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to love someone new without feeling like I'm betraying someone old. Maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe there's room for both. Is there? I don't know. She squeezed his hand. But I'm willing to find out. If you are. The silence stretched between them. Then Jake leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead. Not a kiss of passion, but something deeper. A promise. An acknowledgement. 60 days, he said against her skin. That's what we've got. After that, we'll figure it out. Together. He pulled back. His eyes were wet, but he was almost smiling. You're stubborn as hell, you know that. I've been told. Good. You'll need to be. The next morning, Maggie woke to Hank screaming. She threw off her blankets and ran her heart in her throat. Jake was already at the boy's room, holding him, but Hank was inconsolable, tears streaming down his face, his small body shaking with sobs. What happened? Maggie demanded. Nightmare. Jake's voice was tight. He gets them sometimes, about Hannah. Mama? Hank wailed. I want Mama. I know, son, I know. Maggie knelt beside them. Hank, look at me. The boy's eyes found hers, red, swollen, terrified. I forgot her face, he gasped. I dreamed about her, and I couldn't see her face. I'm forgetting her, Maggie. I'm forgetting my Mama. The words broke something inside her. You're not forgetting her, Maggie said firmly. You couldn't forget her if you tried. She's part of you, in your eyes, in your laugh, in the way you care about animals and ask too many questions. She's in everything you are. But I can't see her. Then we'll help you remember. Maggie looked at Jake. The photograph, on the mantel. Jake hesitated, then nodded. He carried Hank to the main room, and Maggie retrieved the small framed picture, Hannah young and smiling, frozen in a moment of joy. Look, Maggie said, holding it where Hank could see. Look at her. Hank stared at the photograph. His sobs quieted. She's pretty. She's beautiful. And she loved you more than anything in the world. How do you know? Because I would. The words came out before Maggie could stop them. If you were mine, I would love you more than anything. Hank looked at her, then at his father, then back at her. Do you love me, Maggie? The question was so simple, so devastating. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I do. Hank crawled from his father's lap into her arms. He was warm and small and smelled like wood smoke and little boy. I love you too, he said against her shoulder. Don't leave. Please don't ever leave. I won't. I promise. She looked up at Jake. His eyes were wet again, but he was smiling a real smile, the first she'd ever seen. I think, he said slowly, that we need to talk about what happens next. Not tonight. Maggie held Hank closer. Tonight, let's just be together. Jake nodded. He moved to sit beside them, his arm going around Maggie's shoulders, his hand resting on Hank's back. The three of them stayed like that until dawn, a family in everything but name, held together by hope and desperation and something that might have been love. Outside, the first hints of spring were beginning to show. The snow was melting. The world was thawing. And in 60 days, everything would either fall apart or come together. They just didn't know which yet. 43 days left. Maggie counted them every morning, scratching marks into the windowsill like a prisoner tracking time. The money was coming in slowly, painfully, not nearly enough. Teaching lessons to the Valley children brought in $2 a week. Selling bread and preserves to Ellie's boarding house added another $3. Jake had sold one horse, his second-best mare, for $30 that should have been $50. They had $78 saved. They needed 212. The math was impossible. They did it anyway. "You're wearing yourself thin," Jake said one evening, watching her knead bread dough with hands that had started cracking from the cold and the work. "I'm fine." "You're not. You barely sleep. You eat half what Hank does. You're going to collapse if you keep this up." "And what's the alternative? Give up." Maggie slammed the dough against the table harder than necessary. "Watch Whitmore take everything." "The alternative is admitting we might not win this." She stopped kneading, looked at him. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't you dare give up now." "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic." "You're being a coward." The word hung between them like a slap. Jake's expression hardened. "Careful." "No, I won't be careful. I've spent my whole life being careful. And where did it get me? Sitting on a train platform with a gun in my hand." Maggie wiped flour on her apron. "You want to be realistic? Here's realistic. We've got 43 days, $78, and a community that's willing to fight. That's more than most people have. That's more than I had when I got here." "Maggie, I love you." The words fell out before she could stop them. Jake went completely still. "What? You heard me?" Her voice was shaking, but she didn't look away. "I love you. I love Hank. I love this stupid, broken-down ranch with its leaky roof and its stubborn horses and its owner who can't read and won't admit he needs help. I love all of it. And I'm not going to watch it disappear without a fight." Jake crossed the kitchen in 3 strides. His hands found her face, tilting it up toward his. "Say it again." "I love you." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. 4 years of loneliness and 6 weeks of wanting crashed together like waves against rocks. Maggie grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer, and Jake's arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground. "Daddy, Maggie, are you fighting?" They broke apart. Hank stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "No, son." Jake's voice was rough. "We're not fighting." "Then why were your faces so close?" Maggie felt heat rise to her cheeks. Jake actually laughed, a real laugh, rusty but genuine. "I was thanking Maggie for something." "Must have been a big thank you. Your face is all red." "Go back to bed, Hank." "But I'm not tired." "Go anyway." The boy retreated, grumbling. Jake turned back to Maggie. "I should have said it first," he admitted. "I've been wanting to say it for weeks. But every time I tried, I saw Hannah's face and I couldn't." "I know. I still see her. I probably always will. But you were right what you said before. There's room for both. She doesn't get smaller because you exist. It's like—" He struggled for words. "It's like the ranch. Hannah and I built it together, but just because she's gone doesn't mean I can't keep building. Doesn't mean I can't add new rooms." "New rooms?" "You, Hank having a mother again. Maybe—" He stopped. "I'm getting ahead of myself." "Maybe not." Maggie's hand found his. "We should get married." Jake stared at her. "What? Think about it. If we're married, I can legally work. I can access my inheritance from Boston. There's $300 sitting in a bank with my name on it, more than enough to save the ranch. You have $300. In Boston. I can't touch it unless I'm there in person or—" She met his eyes. "Or unless my husband claims it on my behalf. Banks let men do things women can't. That's why you want to marry me, for the money. No, you stubborn fool, I want to marry you because I love you. The money is just a practical consideration." She squeezed his hand. "Is that so terrible, using the law's stupidity against itself?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Hannah would have liked you," he murmured. "She always said I needed someone who could match me for stubbornness." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes." They married 3 days later. The ceremony was simple. Reverend Brennan officiating Ellie and old Tom as witnesses, Hank standing between them in his two big boots with the most serious expression a 5-year-old had ever worn. "Do you take this woman?" the Reverend asked. "I do." Jake's voice was steady. "And do you take this man?" "I do." Maggie's wasn't. "Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." Jake kissed her properly this time in front of witnesses, and Hank cheered loud enough to wake the dead. "I have a mama again," he shouted. "A real one." Maggie knelt, pulling him into her arms. "I'm not replacing your first mama, sweetheart. I'm just adding to your family." "I know." Hank's small hands cupped her face. "But you're mine now. That's what married means. You belong to us, forever." Forever. The word felt like a promise and a prayer. The celebration was brief. There was too much work to do for extended joy. But that night after Hank was asleep and the cabin was quiet, Jake and Maggie sat together by the fire. "I never thought I'd do this again," Jake admitted. "Stand in front of a preacher, make vows, mean them." "Do you mean them more than I've meant anything in years?" He turned to look at her. "I meant what I said that first night. I wasn't looking for a wife, wasn't looking for love, but you showed up anyway and you didn't give me a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not with you. You walked into my life like a storm, and storms don't ask permission." His hand found hers. "I'm glad you didn't give me a choice. I would have made the wrong one." "What would you have done?" "Sent you back to town, kept building walls, died alone in this cabin while Hank grew up thinking love was something that only hurt." Jake's voice dropped. "You saved us, Maggie, whether you meant to or not. You saved me first. You just didn't know it." They sat in comfortable silence watching the flames. "I'll ride to Helena tomorrow," Jake said finally. "Start the process to claim your inheritance. With any luck, we'll have the money before Whitmore's deadline. And if we don't, then we find another way. That's what you keep telling me, isn't it? There's always another way." Maggie leaned against his shoulder. "I'm rubbing off on you." "You are. It's terrifying." She laughed, really laughed, the sound surprising even herself. Jake's arm came around her, pulling her closer. "I love that sound," he said. "Your laugh. I don't hear it often enough. Maybe I haven't had enough to laugh about, until now. Then I'll spend the rest of my life giving you reasons." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "That's a promise, Mrs. McAllister." Mrs. McAllister. The name felt foreign. Right, but foreign. She was still getting used to it when everything went wrong. 31 days left. Jake had been in Helena for a week navigating the bureaucracy of banks and lawyers and inheritance claims. Maggie received letters every few days, brief, practical, frustrating. "Bank wants more documentation. Lawyer says it'll take time. Don't worry." She worried anyway. Without Jake, the ranch felt emptier. She and Hank developed their own routines, lessons in the morning, chores in the afternoon, stories by the fire at night. The boy was thriving, his letters improving daily, his laughter coming easier. "Will Daddy be home soon?" he asked every morning. "Soon," she promised. "Very soon." But soon kept getting further away. On the 8th day, the stranger arrived. Maggie was in the barn when she heard the horse. She grabbed the pitchfork, the only weapon available, and stepped outside. The man dismounted with easy grace. He was handsome, she noticed immediately. Too handsome. Dark hair, bright eyes, a smile that showed too many teeth. "Mrs. McAllister, I presume?" Her blood went cold. "Who's asking?" "Thomas Garrett." He tipped his hat. "Though I believe you knew me by a different name." Thomas Mercer. The man from the letters. The man who didn't exist, except he did. He was standing in front of her flesh and blood and smiling like he had every right to be there. "You're supposed to be a lie," Maggie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh," The mining operation was a lie. That part I'll admit freely. But I'm very real, I assure you. He stepped closer. And I've come to collect what's mine. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? My letters promised you a husband, a home, a future. I may have embellished the details, but the essence was true. You came here to marry me, Maggie. Just because I was slightly delayed doesn't void our agreement. There was no agreement. You lied to me. You took my money. I invested your money in an opportunity that unfortunately didn't pan out. Garrett shrugged. These things happen, but I'm prepared to make it right. I have a new enterprise in California, legitimate this time, and I need a wife to make it work. Investors trust married men. I'm already married. To a dirt farmer who can't read. Garrett laughed. I've done my research, Mrs. McAllister. I know about the tax debt. I know your husband is in Helena scrambling for money he won't get in time. I know this ranch will belong to Calvin Whitmore in 31 days. Maggie's grip tightened on the pitchfork. How do you know Whitmore? We're business associates. He mentioned a stubborn rancher whose mail-order bride had unexpectedly solved her own problems. Garrett's smile widened. He was quite annoyed, actually. Had to adjust his plans. You're working together, you and Whitmore. Working together is a strong term. Let's say our interests occasionally align. He pulled something from his coat papers, official looking. Here's my offer. Come with me to California. I'll pay off your husband's debt as a parting gift. The ranch stays in the family. Everyone wins. Except me. On the contrary, you win most of all. A life of comfort instead of this. He gestured at the ranch with obvious disdain. This slow death by hard work. You're educated, Maggie. Refined. You deserve better than splitting wood and scrubbing floors for a man who'll never give you the life you imagined. The life I imagined was a lie. You created it. I created a dream. Dreams aren't lies, they're possibilities. Garrett stepped closer still. Come with me. Say goodbye to this little family of yours and step into the future you deserve. Maggie. Hank's voice came from the cabin doorway. He was holding Biscuit's collar, his small face confused and afraid. Go inside, Hank. Who's that man? No one. Go inside now. But Garrett had already turned, examining the boy with cold interest. This must be the child. Cute. Shame he'll grow up without a mother again. Something snapped inside Maggie. She swung the pitchfork. Garrett dodged, but not completely. One tine caught his arm, tearing his expensive coat and drawing blood. He stumbled backward, shock replacing his composure. You little... Leave! Maggie's voice was ice. Leave now, or I swear to God I'll finish what I started. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was answering your letters. Get off this property before I put a pitchfork through your heart. Garrett retreated to his horse, clutching his arm. This isn't over, Maggie. Whitmore's deadline stands, and when your husband fails, and he will fail, I'll be waiting. He rode away fast, disappearing into the distance. Maggie stood frozen, pitchfork still raised, until Hank's arms wrapped around her legs. You scared him away, the boy said, his voice awed. You scared him like Daddy scares wolves. I scared myself. She dropped the pitchfork, pulled Hank close. I'm sorry you saw that. Don't be sorry. He was bad. I could tell. His eyes were wrong. Hank looked up at her. Are you okay, Mama? Mama. He'd said it before, but never like this, never with such certainty, such trust. I'm okay, she whispered. I'm okay because I have you. That night, Maggie wrote to Jake. She told him everything: Garrett's visit, his connection to Whitmore, his threats. She told him to be careful in Helena, to watch for traps. She told him she loved him, and she wasn't afraid, and she would burn the entire territory down before she let anyone take their family. The letter went out with the Morning Post. 2 days later, the fire started. Maggie woke to Hank's screaming and the smell of smoke. The barn was burning. Flames climbed the walls, fed by dry hay and winter-weakened wood. The horses were screaming, trapped inside. "Stay here," she shouted at Hank, then ran. The heat hit her like a wall. She pulled her shawl over her face and pushed through the barn door. 3 horses. 3 terrified animals. She got to the first Jake's old gelding and cut his rope with the knife she'd grabbed from the kitchen. He bolted for the door. The second horse was harder. Panicked, kicking her hooves, barely missing Maggie's head. But she got the rope cut, shoved the mare toward the exit. One more. The young stallion, the one Jake was training for sale. He was in the back, surrounded by fire. Maggie couldn't reach him. The ceiling was groaning, beginning to collapse. The heat was unbearable. She had seconds maybe before the whole structure came down. "Come on!" she screamed. "Move!" The stallion reared, terrified. Maggie grabbed a bucket of water, threw it at the flames, blocking her path. They hissed, retreated for just a moment. She dove through the gap, seized the stallion's rope, and pulled. "Now!" The horse followed instinct, overriding fear. They burst through the barn door just as the roof gave way, collapsing in a shower of sparks and burning timber. Maggie hit the ground hard. The stallion's hooves missed her head by inches. She lay there gasping, staring at the inferno that had been their barn. "Maggie!" Hank was running toward her, crying, Biscuit barking at his heels. "I'm okay." She sat up, pulled him into her arms. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm okay." But she wasn't. Her hands were burned, her hair singed. The barn, their barn, the one Jake's father had built, was gone. And with it, their hay, their equipment, everything they needed to survive the rest of winter. The horses were safe. That was something. But everything else? "I found this." Old Tom's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him holding something, a metal canister, blackened but recognizable. "Kerosene," he said grimly. "This fire wasn't an accident." Maggie's blood went cold. Garrett, Whitmore, it had to be. "Can you prove it?" "Don't need to prove it. Everyone knows." Tom's jaw tightened. "Question is, what are we going to do about it?" "Rebuild." Maggie struggled to her feet. "We rebuild." "With what?" "You got no materials, no money." "Then we find some." She looked at the burning remains of her barn, at her scorched hands, at her crying son. "They want us to give up. They want us to break. I won't give them the satisfaction." "Maggie, you can barely stand." "Then I'll crawl. I'll crawl to Helena if I have to and drag Jake back myself. But I am not letting them win." Old Tom studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "Hannah was fierce," he said. "But you might be fiercer." "Is that a compliment?" "It's a fact." He turned toward his wagon. "Come on. You're staying at my place tonight. Tomorrow we start making plans." Maggie gathered Hank in her arms and followed. Behind them the fire burned on. Somewhere in Helena, Jake felt something wrong. He couldn't explain it. Just a twist in his gut, a cold certainty that something had happened. He'd been arguing with bank clerks for 3 hours, getting nowhere, drowning in paperwork and excuses. "The inheritance requires verification," the clerk repeated for the 10th time. "Your wife must appear in person." "My wife is in Montana. She can't appear anywhere." "Then we'll need additional documentation. Proof of marriage. Proof of identity. Proof of—" "I have proof. I've shown you proof. What more do you want?" "Sir, please calm down." Jake slammed his hand on the counter. "My family is in danger. Every day I spend in this office is a day they're alone, unprotected. I need that money, and I need it now. I understand your urgency, but you don't understand anything." He walked out. There had to be another way. There was always another way. Maggie believed that. He was starting to believe it too. He found a telegraph office and sent a message home. "Coming back. Stop. Money delayed. Stop. Are you safe? Stop." The reply came 2 hours later. "Barn burned. Stop." Garrett responsible. Stop. We are fine. Stop. Come home. Stop. Jake read the message 3 times. Barn burned. Garrett. The name meant nothing to him, but the message meant everything. His family needed him. The money could wait. He bought the fastest horse he could afford and rode through the night. 23 days left. The barn was ashes. Garrett was circling. Whitmore was waiting. But Jake was coming home, and together they would find a way. They had to. Jake rode through the gate at dawn, 3 days hard riding written in every line of his body. Maggie was waiting on the porch. She ran to him before he could dismount, pulling him down from the horse and into her arms. He smelled like sweat and road dust and exhaustion, and she had never been so glad to hold anyone in her life. I came as fast as I could. His voice was raw. The barn, gone. But we're alive. The horses are alive. Garrett. Who is he? Thomas Mercer. The man I came here to marry. Maggie pulled back, meeting his eyes. He's real Jake. And he's working with Whitmore. Jake's jaw hardened. Where is he now? I don't know. He disappeared after the fire, but he'll be back. He wants me to leave with him, says he'll pay off our debt if I go. Like hell. That's what I told him, with a pitchfork. Despite everything, Jake's mouth twitched. You attacked him. I defended my family. She touched his face. Our family. Daddy. Hank came running from old Tom's wagon, where they'd been staying since the fire. He launched himself at Jake, nearly knocking him over. You came back. I knew you'd come back. Always, son. I'll always come back. Jake held him tight. Are you okay? Were you scared? A little, but Mama was brave. She saved the horses all by herself. Jake looked at Maggie over Hank's head. She's good at saving things. What about the money, Daddy? Did you get the money? The question hung in the air. Jake's expression answered before his words did. Not yet. Bank needs more paperwork. More time. Time we don't have, Maggie said quietly. I know. They stood there, the 3 of them, in front of the ruins of their barn. 22 days left. No money. No backup plan. Just each other. We'll figure it out, Hank said with the certainty of children. We always figure it out. Yes, Maggie said, squeezing his shoulder. We do. But she didn't know how. Not this time. The community meeting happened that night in Ellie River's boarding house. Every family in the valley crowded into the small parlor. The Hendersons, Old Tom, Reverend Brennan. Faces Maggie had come to know over the past weeks, hard faces, worried faces, but determined ones. Whitmore's deadline is in 22 days, Jake said, standing before them. We've got $103 saved. We need $212. What about the inheritance? Mrs. Henderson asked. Bank won't release it without Maggie appearing in person, and we can't afford for her to travel to Boston. So we're stuck, Old Tom said grimly. We're not stuck. Maggie stepped forward. We're challenged. There's a difference. What do you suggest, rob a bank? I suggest we stop thinking like individuals and start thinking like a community. She looked around the room. How many of you are in the same position? How many have debts you can't pay land Whitmore wants to take? Hands went up. 3, 4, 5 families. That's 6 properties Whitmore is trying to steal. 6 families he's trying to destroy. Alone, none of us can fight him. But together we're still poor, someone muttered. Together we're witnesses. Maggie's voice strengthened. Garrett set fire to our barn. He admitted his connection to Whitmore. If we can prove they're working together, prove the taxes are being manipulated, the threats coordinated, we can take this to the territorial governor, maybe even federal authorities. That's a lot of ifs. It's more than we had yesterday. Jake moved to stand beside her. My wife's right. We've been fighting this like it's a money problem. It's not. It's a crime problem. Whitmore isn't just collecting taxes, he's stealing land, and criminals can be stopped. How? Reverend Brennan asked. We'd need evidence, testimony, something that proves intent. Then we get it. Maggie thought of Garrett, his smug smile, his careless admission. Garrett talked too much when he came to threaten me. He'll talk again if he thinks he's winning. We just need to give him a reason to gloat. You want to bait him? I want to trap him. The room fell silent. Then old Tom started laughing, a dry, dusty sound. I'll be damned, he said. The Boston schoolteacher wants to run a con. Not a con, justice. Maggie looked at Jake. Are you with me? Always. Then let's make a plan. The plan was simple. Dangerous but simple. Maggie would send word to Garrett that she'd reconsidered his offer. She'd agree to meet him alone at the old mining camp outside town. She'd get him talking, get him to repeat his threats, his connection to Whitmore. What Garrett wouldn't know was that Jake would be hidden nearby listening to every word. Reverend Brennan would be there too, as a witness whose word would carry weight with authorities. I don't like it, Jake said the night before the meeting. They were in the cabin, Hank asleep in the next room. Putting you in danger. I've been in danger since I got off that train. At least this time I'm choosing it. What if he hurts you? What if he doesn't? What if this works? Maggie took his hands. I spent my whole life being careful, Jake. Being safe. And it got me nowhere. Sometimes you have to take risks for the things that matter. You matter. More than the ranch, more than the money. I know. That's why I have to do this. Because I matter to you, and you matter to me, and Hank matters to both of us. And none of that means anything if we lose our home. Jake pulled her close. If anything happens to you. It won't. I've got a guardian angel in 2 big boots who already saved me once. Hank. Hank. She smiled against his chest. He found me at my lowest and brought me here. I don't believe in fate, but I believe in him. I believe in us. I love you, Maggie McAllister. I love you too, Jacob McAllister. Now let me go save our ranch. The mining camp was abandoned, rusting equipment, scattered like bones in the mud. Maggie arrived first as planned. She stood near the old shaft entrance, her heart pounding, her hands steady. Somewhere in the hills, Jake was watching. Somewhere else, Reverend Brennan waited to bear witness. She wasn't alone. She had to remember that. Hoofbeats announced Garrett's arrival. He dismounted with his usual elegance, his injured arm wrapped in a silk bandage. You came. He smiled, that too bright smile. I knew you would. I didn't have much choice. There's always a choice, Maggie. That's what makes this interesting. He walked toward her. You chose me, just like you should have from the beginning. I chose survival. There's a difference. Is there? I find they often look the same. He stopped a few feet away. So, you've reconsidered my offer. I want guarantees, written proof that our debt will be paid. And what do I get in return? Me. Isn't that what you wanted? Garrett laughed. What I wanted was a wife who could play the part. Charming, educated, presentable. You exceeded expectations. He circled her slowly. But I confess your resistance has made you even more valuable. Investors love a love story. The mail-order bride who chose her heart over her homeland. You want me to lie for you. I want you to perform. Same thing, really. He pulled papers from his coat. The debt agreement. Signed by Calvin Whitmore himself. Once you leave with me, the McAllister Ranch is clear. And if I refuse, then things get unpleasant. His voice hardened. Whitmore has friends in law enforcement. It would be remarkably easy to have your husband arrested for something, debt evasion perhaps. Or assault. I hear he has a temper. You'd frame an innocent man. I'd protect my investment. Garrett stepped closer. Let me be clear, Maggie. You're coming with me. The only question is whether you come willingly, leaving your family in peace, or whether you come after we've destroyed everything they have. Everything you and Whitmore have worked so hard to steal, you mean? Steal is such an ugly word. We prefer acquire. He smiled. 6 ranches this year alone. Yours would have been 7, but you complicated things. By refusing to die quietly. By being inconveniently resilient. He reached for her arm. Now, shall we go? I don't think so. Jake emerged from behind a collapsed structure rifle raised. Reverend Brennan appeared from the opposite direction, his face grim with righteous anger. Garrett went pale. What is this? Justice. Maggie stepped back out of his reach. You just confessed to conspiracy fraud and attempting to coerce a married woman into abandoning her family in front of a man of God. This won't hold up. It's my word against a minister's testimony against my husband's. Maggie shook her head. You're not as smart as you think you are, Thomas, or whatever your real name is. Garrett's composure cracked. He lunged for Maggie. Jake moved faster. His fist connected with Garrett's jaw, sending the man sprawling in the mud. That's for threatening my wife. Jake stood over him, rifle aimed at his chest. And this is for everything else. You can't prove anything. I don't have to. Jake pulled rope from his belt. The territorial marshal will, once he hears what we have to say. They tied Garrett to his own horse and rode back to Copper Creek. The next 18 days were a blur. The territorial marshal arrived within a week, summoned by Reverend Brennan's urgent telegram. He interviewed everyone, Maggie, Jake, the neighbors, even Ellie Rivers, who had her own stories about Whitmore's intimidation tactics. This is exactly what we've been looking for, the marshal said, reviewing the evidence. Whitmore's been operating in 3 territories. We just needed someone brave enough to stand up to him. And stupid enough, Jake muttered. Brave, Maggie corrected. The word is brave. Garrett broke under interrogation. Names, dates, properties, everything came spilling out in a desperate attempt to save himself. Whitmore was arrested in Helena 3 days later, found trying to flee with saddlebags full of stolen money. The tax debts were voided. All of them for all 6 families. It's over, Jake said the night they got the news. They were sitting on their porch watching Hank play with Biscuit in the yard. It's actually over. Not over. Maggie leaned against his shoulder. Just beginning. What do you mean? We still have a barn to rebuild, a ranch to run, a son to raise. She took his hand. And I have letters to write. Letters. To my aunt's lawyer in Boston. I'm going to transfer my inheritance here, build a proper schoolhouse for the Valley children, make something permanent. Jake turned to look at her. You want to stay? I want to live, here with you with Hank, for as long as you'll have me. That'll be forever then. Forever sounds about right. Hank came running over Biscuit at his heels. Daddy, Mama, come see, there's a rainbow. They stood together, the 3 of them, looking at the colors arching across the sky. The storms were behind them. The future was ahead. Mama, Hank said, tugging her hand. Tell me the story again. What story? How you found us, how you almost went away but I stopped you. Maggie knelt beside him, smoothing his hair. Once upon a time there was a woman who thought she had nothing left to live for. She sat in a train station waiting for a man who never came ready to give up. But then a boy appeared. A boy in boots too big for his feet, but with a heart too big for his chest. And he said, "Please don't." Hank finished grinning. I remember. You saved me, Hank McAllister. Don't ever forget that. I won't. He hugged her fiercely. And you saved us right back. Jake's hand found her shoulder. She leaned into him, her family surrounding her, the Montana sky endless above. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a woman with a gun and no hope. Now she was a wife, a mother, a fighter. Now she was home. The schoolhouse was built that summer. Maggie painted the sign herself, Copper Creek School. The children came from every ranch in the valley. 7 students at first, then 12, then 15, as word spread that there was a real teacher in town. You're famous, Jake told her one evening. The Boston school teacher who saved a valley. I didn't save anything. We saved each other. Always so modest. Always so honest. He kissed her, still a surprise. Still a miracle, even after months of marriage. She suspected it always would be. Hank was thriving. Reading, writing, asking questions that challenged even Maggie's education. He'd started teaching the younger children patient and kind, his mother's ghost, and his stepmother's example living in every word. He's going to be something special, Reverend Brennan said after church one Sunday. He already is, Maggie replied. Fall came with harvest and plenty. The community gathered for a celebration, food and music and laughter that echoed across the valley. Old Tom danced with Ellie Rivers, while everyone pretended not to notice. The Henderson girls performed a play they'd written themselves. Hank delivered a speech that made grown men cry. To the woman who saved our valley, he said, raising a glass of cider. My mama, the bravest person I know. Maggie stood to respond, but words failed her. Jake stepped close, his arm around her waist. Let me, he murmured. He faced the crowd. Most of you know my story. Lost my first wife. Nearly lost my son. Definitely lost my way. His voice caught. Then a stranger got off a train with nothing but a carpet bag and a broken heart. I didn't want to let her in. I was scared, scared of hoping again, scared of losing again, scared of everything. He turned to Maggie. But she didn't give me a choice. She just kept being kind, kept being brave, kept choosing us when she could have chosen easier. His hand found hers. I spent 4 years talking to my dead wife because I didn't know how to talk to anyone else. Maggie taught me that the dead don't need our voices. The living do. Hannah didn't want me to mourn forever. She wanted me to live, to love, to raise our son with joy instead of sorrow. He lifted their joined hands. So here's to new beginnings, to second chances, to choosing hope when despair would be easier, and to the woman who taught me all of that just by being herself. The crowd erupted in cheers. Maggie pulled Jake close, laughing and crying at the same time. That was beautiful, she whispered. That was true. You made me better, Maggie. You made us all better. We made each other better. That's what family does. Later that night, after the celebration ended, and Hank fell asleep clutching his reading primer, Maggie stood at Hannah's grave. I hope you don't mind, she said to the stone. I'm not trying to replace you. I'm just trying to love them as well as you did. The wind rustled through the pine tree. For a moment, just a moment, it sounded almost like a voice. Thank you. Maggie smiled. You're welcome. She walked back to the cabin where Jake waited on the porch. He held out his hand and she took it. Ready to come inside? In a minute. I want to remember this. Remember what? All of it. The stars. The quiet. The feeling of being exactly where I'm supposed to be. She squeezed his hand. I spent so long looking for home. Turns out home was looking for me. Found you on a train platform. In the voice of a child. In 2 big boots. They laughed together, easy and warm. Above them, the stars blazed eternal. Below them, the land stretched patient and wild. Behind them, their son slept safe. Ahead of them, a lifetime waited. Margaret Thornton had come to Montana to marry a man who didn't exist. She found something better. She found a broken family that needed her as much as she needed them. She found a purpose bigger than her pain. She found love in the last place she expected, blooming like wildflowers through cracked earth. She found home. Not the home she'd imagined, grander and easier, and wrapped in someone else's promises. A real home. Hard-won and hand-built and worth every struggle. She found herself, and she was never lost again.